Blizzard's best work had always came from borrowing ideas from the competition and then just polishing them to perfection. And then that kinda stopped. WoW kinda got lost in its own weeds, drunkenly stumbling around, falling headfirst into seasonal loot progression, a big pit of sand, as if the MMORPG should be following games like Path of Exile or Destiny. So let's learn from Final Fantasy XIV, an MMORPG. And I'm not just going to sit here and tell you, oh, just tell a story with 20 hours of cutscenes per expansion, and 4.5 hours a patch, and then radically rethink the core identity of your game and somehow have a decade-long story. Yeah, look, there are narrative lessons to be learned from Final Fantasy XIV, but they're not massively relevant to what WoW can actually do right now. I mean, what's the main one? They can do their story because that end fits their storytelling means. Blizzard's narrative ambitions do not fit their means. They would either have to change everything of how they do their expansions to achieve that, or they could just try to tell a story, reduce the ambition of their plot, lean on decentralized storytelling through incredible lore, world building, and then, that's adjusting their ends to fit their means. And we could get the best that WoW could do so that everything else could shine. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get into the video and self-promo. Did you know we're also a game studio? That is literally what's going on right now behind that wall. So, Wishlist The Pale Beyond on Steam. Maximum immersion, big sound, big art, player choice. It's a single player RPG, wholly designed to place you in the center and bring a fantasy that is rarely seen in gaming to you. So wishlisting us on Steam, it helps so much with the Steam algorithm, it's really important, so go check out them down below, and let's go. Keep gearing simple. We do not need layers and layers and layers. You see, if WoW is all designed around gearing, then gearing is all we'll think about, and that'll impact the design. A world with more simple gearing is a world where WoW's max level content is more diverse and fantastical. Final Fantasy XIV does not have overly complex gearing to suck the oxygen out of the endgame experience, and if it was complex, then the developers would end up finding themselves custodians of that big gearing system with all the balance concerns and all the troubles associated. And it's hard to create when you are a custodian. And the time needed to keep all that gear in check comes at a cost. That cost is everything else those designers could be doing. And that's big. The race for gear has overtaken the three pillars of modern World of Warcraft, and that means there's barely room for anything else. I mean, hell, they didn't even get around to updating the Brawlers Guild for Shadowlands. So far, anyway. Free time in the schedule allows for things like the Solo Shuffle, which is brilliant, Mage Tower Time Walking, which is brilliant, Deaths of Chromie, that was great, and just about anything else they could unleash their creativity on. And when they do have these flourishes, they're really good, things like Deaths of Chromie. Would patch 6.1 have such a diverse array of content, with 6.2 bringing island sanctuaries, if Square Enix had monumental balance complexity across multiple different progression and content systems? If they'd tied themselves down to having gargantuan raid tiers that, let's be real, typically do have a few filler bosses that we don't really need. So I'd say keep it simple, keep the current players happy with what they've got, and then broaden that endgame experience. That could be player housing, it could be guild housing, it could be fishing expeditions, it could be a proper, high-effort set of Darkmoon Faire games with greatly expanded rewards, it could be time walking expanded across the entire game in a radical new way, it could be returning Trove of the Thunder King, more class quests, more unique class rewards like Warlock Green Fire. I mean, Blizz, you keep deploying masses of resources to remaking the Timeless Isles again and again. Where else could those resources go? Does every patch have to have a new island with a new take and catch-up gear? What does the other path look like? Talk. Talk openly. Cut the PR. Japanese companies, they have a bloody reputation for being corporate and hierarchical. So how is it that Square Enix is beating you to a pulp? Does Ian not want to do a live letter? Fine, throw Jeremy Fiesel out. That guy seems to love, the whole communicating and being a camera thing. And in fairness, the camera gig's not for everyone. Frankly, it's not for me. This is not my natural environment whatsoever. Whatever it takes, they need to fix this. There is almost no asset better than your community relationship. Don't have the game director gaslight us about Shadowlands always being a 2-patch expansion. So cut the bullshit and get real. You know you're being defeated on community interaction. You are not the vaunted rock stars that we look up to every BlizzCon, and it turns out that wasn't even a good thing. You're just like us. So get in our level, talk how we talk. It's not scary. It is, in fact, the easy way out of this. You can flick a camera on. It's not that hard. You've done it before. Just cut whatever tape you need. And I think you can prove to whatever corporate masters that could be the problem that this works, because you have a market example of it working. Produce your darn game. FF14 tended to have a patch every 3.5 months. Recently, they changed that to every 4 months, and they explained exactly why. Now, can you imagine having that level of faith and trust? Well, for FF, that was earned by years of actually delivering. Now, if development can't be that predictable with World of Warcraft, then clearly something is wrong. How does such a large team at such a large company seem to allocate their time so inefficiently? So I guess ask yourselves, what would it look like if it was easy? And that can be a scary question sometimes if you deeply engage in it. Let's ask some fundamental questions. Does every raid need to be a massive new thing with a super expensive tile set with so many bosses that a few of them are guaranteed to be filler? Is the seasonal conception of Warcraft essentially ruining your ability to develop the game flexibly because wrapping everything up in a season means that all forms of content are lashed together in a sort of build it once, throw it away, and build it again, rinse and repeat paradigm? A very strange way to make a game. You're just making the same thing again and again and again and again. You're not actually making the game bigger. Are your classes, borrowed power and reward systems so complex and over-designed that you're no longer game designers? Instead, you are psychers, channeling the last of your life into the God Emperor's golden throne, an everlasting meat grinder that only serves to elongate stasis. Because it feels like that's what some of WoW's systems are at this stage. It's like the game, it's just continuing. It's not really getting bigger or better. It's just a whole bunch of effort going into not having the big, complex, weird mechanics fall over. Free your mind from what is and think what could be, and how that could be delivered to your subscription fee paying customers in a predictable manner. BFA brought with it a horrible concept, and that is seasons. Oh boy. In the Legion expansion, Blizzard split raid tiers from world content. And yes, that meant the Broken Shore came out 77 days before Tomb of Sargeras, and Taurus came out 77 days after Argus. Mythic Plus item levels and such kept up with the raid. And sure, it was a bit messy, but what it did do is it gave players a predictable, consistent patch cycle that allowed for bits of content to be slotted in where it made sense. Zone is ready, raid isn't. Sure, give us the zone, it'll be something to do. Even if not, why not add content between large patches? Like, seriously, what happened? Why is this not happening? What gives? In FF14, we're not getting Pandemonium's second wing in patch 6.1. No, we're getting Myths of the Realm, but also some other cool things. There's enough there to keep the raiders happy, but also there's nice things like the Tataru side quest and Hildebrandt. So Blizzard, what happened to the nice-to-haves? Has everything in the game been sucked up by the need for monolithic seasonal releases? What happened to the flavor? Why does everything have to be instant content as a part of a season and that season's gearing loop, or an attempt to recapture the Time of the Isle? When the endgame experience is more free and more horizontal, then as developers you are less dependent on gargantuan mega patches that revamp Season 1 into Season 2, expending vast amounts of resources just to get us another set of raid gear and another Timeless Isle sort of inspired zone. So imagine a patch coming out with new Brawlers Guild content, a few class challenges, a side quest with Chromie, heritage armor sets, maybe a few updated in-game events, in-game holidays. I mean, that would be a way to keep World of Warcraft feeling fresh. Why is Blizzard not set up to deliver content in this manner? Because this is what would be good for the MMO and the RPG. Is there a production issue? Or is it that the leadership team of this game does view it as a seasonal loot progression game that's supposed to then just sort of have a Timeless Isle-inspired zone to keep all of those, you know, all the things and the casual players happy? I don't know, but something is a bit weird, and I feel like this tying everything into seasons has just made World of Warcraft way more narrow, and that's not a good thing. Let's dive deeper into one of those points. Mythic Plus gearing impacts raiding. Raid gearing impacts Mythic Plus. Open world content sometimes impacts player power. Borrowed power additions impact every single spec in the game. Updates to borrowed power do that on a per patch basis. Double legendaries impact all Covenant balance, down to the level of the Soulbinds and the Conduits. This impacts people's Covenant choice. That means you've got to develop a way for people to swap Covenants with ease. And that means you've got to develop a renown catch-up system so that playing more specs in your character or whatever is possible. That's all like one little chain. It's a house of cards. WoW is a systemic house of cards, and it is so fragile. Covenant powers just hurt endgame. Domination shards hurt endgame. WoW's elements are so deeply tied to each other because when some of these developers think role-playing game, they think increasing player power curve. And when that's how you see RPG, then it all turns into a design game of how can we allocate player power budget to maximally juice progression for their goopy gamer brains. And that's how the game makes us feel. That's not how you build a memorable world, and it's not how you set development up to surprise and delight players with evolutionary features that make that world more rich. Are we really getting all we can from raid content? I mean, FF14 does so much a better job of teaching players game mechanics, and that even goes down to its combat res system. Sure, you'll get a throughput debuff that'll get worse if you're rezzed again within a minute, but in FF, of course, we're used to unlimited battle reses. Of course, the cost is time, and then obviously wiping if you can't hit core breakpoints in a fight and you just lose all your throughput. And of course, many of the game's hardest bits of content absolutely do not allow for many deaths. It's an incredible combat res system that fits every difficulty level that they design. It's incredible. And yes, it does mean that success rates are higher for lower difficulty content because it will tolerate more mistakes at the cost of time. That's fine. If it's fun, then that's really good. It will actually get people raiding. Now, I've been in and around WoW for a long time, and let me tell you, ICC10 was not super hard. ICC10 was, in fact, there at the pinnacle of WoW's popularity. But World of Warcraft shot itself in the foot in Cataclysm by cutting out that accessible difficulty mode. And while Siege of Orgrimmar's Flex and Warlords of Draenor's Normal are great, they began to come with fights that were more and more complex, and sometimes more punishing. So here's the trick with Painsmith, a recent fight that was really loved. It was a fun dance fight that was super visceral, and it didn't need add-ons. That's also the secret to why so many of FF14's normal raids are accessible and fun. Sure, keep the big punishment for Mythic, absolutely, but how about we remove the LFR mode, implement a combat res system far more close to FF14. We then make the normal mode match made, and I think between that and the more liberal combat res system, you could actually get people raiding again more. It would be daring, it would be a big change, but I absolutely think we need to take a look at FF14 and how it's able to get so many people dabbling in raiding, and how through that entire MSQ, you're dipping into dungeons, you're doing trials. I mean, T3, you're probably going to die a few times, and it will feel like a real fight, but because of that combat res system, you learn, you overcome, and you feel an incredible sense of accomplishment. But within WoW, what if there was more to it than just a combat res system? Trash. If it doesn't need to be there, kill it. When it makes sense for the fantasy, keep some trash, but try turning it into a set piece. A bit like that time when you break into Garrosh's underground fortress in Siege of Orgrimmar, you see mountains of trash, but then your allies come in to blast them all. That way, players don't waste their time on trash, and your raid still feels like a raid. Right now, people are suicide running through trash packs with a soul stone so they can then, summon their group to the boss. All because the raid is just more fun when you're not spending loads of time doing trash. And this actually supports another thing that keeps those FF14 raids going. Remember Sartharion, Onyxia, Malagos, Archivon? They were fun little raids with a single boss, a bit more for Archivon, of course, but they were fun things you could just go and do for some neat loot. And unlike a world boss, they were actually fights with design that could be failed if people messed up. Okay, maybe not Archivon, but you get my point. They were perfect if you didn't have much time, and they were a brilliant entryway to raiding. And with all of FF's raid content, you can see how there's kind of similarities. Now, I'll be real with you here. I'm not always sure that a massive 10-boss raid with loads of trash is in the best interest of the average WoW player. I mean, what would it be like if you dropped in a few 1-boss raids, a few 2-boss raids? Maybe you try to make some of them queuable, but not on LFR. And maybe you designed them to be big, spectacle-focused dance fights that don't overtly require add-ons. Is there another direction of raid boss that could exist within World of Warcraft? And the world bosses don't count because they're just big open world messes. If you succeed in doing that, then you'll be able to deliver visually rich fights that deliver a super strong fantasy, it'll be super readable to players, and you'll be able to let someone get a true slice of real raiding, even if they've only got a single hour free. We're not in 2007 anymore. The world is complex, life is hard, everything is vying for our attention, and I think the last thing that WoW needs is more and more barriers to progress. So I think something else on the raiding menu would be very welcome. Progress being on your character, and your character being able to have every job is just wonderful. I think we've all just felt that so strongly with FF14. It means that all that progression that you make it's just so meaningful because you know it applies for everything. There's never a question of, oh, will this story content be fun in a second playthrough? You don't need to do that because it's jobs. There's no, for the FF team, how do we implement a progress skip for alts? It's so good. And with FF, I've seen the light. Now, World of Warcraft is not built like FF14. And I think that's where we should actually take inspiration from FF14 and how it feels, but then maybe take a leaf from Star Wars The Old Republic's legacy system. Essentially, what you want to do is build a bit of a theme, maybe a bit of a system around account-wide progress. You want to codify that into your standard operating procedure and then implement it going forward, really without rethinking or redesigning it or remaking the wheel. The question then is, how far do we go? And that's hard. I mean, I would generally say more BOA items, more ways to progress on mains to accelerate, the progress on alts. Maybe if you earn enough Valor points in your main for the week, how about we just do what Mist of Pandaria did? Just buff your VP earnings on your alts. Max out reputation on your main, 200% boost in rep gains for that reputation on an alt. Why not? You've already earned it. Maybe some people want to count ride reps. I'm not 100% sure about that, but let's have these ideas. I mean, if you want to go super mad, you could even slap a Paragon level on your WoW account. You could tie it into some sort of WoW version of a legacy system, and you could put some cosmetic rewards on it. Who knows? World of Warcraft is just too darn stingy, I think, in all of this. And it's a world where people want a rich diversity of gameplay fantasies, but the game systems of Warcraft just get in the way of that. So I would say, let's find the solution to account-wide progress and just implement it early and often and continuously, and then maybe wrap it up in a nice UI so it's visually satisfying and it feels like players are actually unlocking and making their way through something. If that's done, then we never need to have this conversation again, and that would be great. Okay, there are almost certainly more lessons for WoW to learn. And in fairness, 14 probably does have some lessons to learn for World of Warcraft. After all, Cataclysm and Mist of Pandaria were heavily referenced in the endeavor to save FF14. But I just wanted to sit down and talk about from a game positioning and what the structure of endgame is, what are the sorts of inspirations that can be taken? I think with WoW, you see a pretty monolithic development process that is all around this seasonal content where it's all tied together. Where if you look at patch 6.1, one of the things people are really happy about is Ishgard housing. Ishgard's from the Heavensward expansion a long time ago, yet getting its housing district now is very exciting to people. One of the quest lines is a follow-up to Omega, which is a Stormblood raid. So I think we should just really think about how broad that endgame could be. And if things weren't all lashed together, well, it could be a lot better. So essentially, that's it for me. Of course, let me know what you think about all these topics, and yeah, I'll see you next time.